software controllers for photo editing. What's that all about, and why would you want one or two or even three? Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Simon, a professional photographer based in the south of England, but I'm also a music composer and producer. In the music world, there's always been a desire to have hands-on control with the controls that you use to manipulate sound. I guess it comes from working on large mixing consoles with faders and knobs that can be used to make fine adjustments to sound, and also outboard gear with in the old days of analog stuff with dials and knobs on that you can control. And when software came along and it all moved inside a computer, there was still this desire to move faders, and often it seems to be a better way to do things. I mean, moving a mouse by a tiny few millimeters to create a movement obviously is possible, and we all do that on a day-to-day basis. But there's just something nice about the sort of muscle memory and the tactility of just reaching for a knob to make a fine adjustment with something. And sometimes I think you can concentrate more on the result of the change by not having to look where your hand is, or make sure that the mouse cursor's over the right place all the time. You can just make the movement and hear the change. When I've been sitting editing photos for extended periods, I've found myself wondering whether physical controls would be a better way to go. I always find myself wondering these things and trying to think about ways of improving my workflow. I probably need to see somebody about it, but anyway, hopefully it's for the benefit of everybody if I can give you some information about where I've gone with this. I started looking into hardware controllers for photo editing and came across some people who developed something where you could use a music MIDI controller to change values in Lightroom, but this was slightly clunky and I didn't have an available MIDI controller that I could use. So I looked further and found a couple of things like the Elgato Streamdeck and the Loupedeck CT, and also in looking into the music thing, I had bought this thing called a Nobcontrol, which is a single rotational controller. So yeah, if I look back here, this is my current setup. So we've got the Streamdeck, the Loupedeck, and the Nobcontrol, and obviously my music controllers. So yeah, I ended up with a Loupedeck Live, not the Loupedeck CT, just because it was smaller and cheaper. And yeah, so I thought I'd go through how I use them. I set up my camera to do a top-down so you can sort of see better how I use them. And we'll jump over the computer and do that now. So here is my setup. I hope you can see everything. Obviously ignore the keyboard for this purpose of photo editing, and also my fader controller that I use for my audio software. But what we're interested in is the Stream Deck here, the Loupedeck here, and the knob controller here, and obviously my trackpad on my laptop. So the great thing about these two things, well, and this, is that they change depending on what software is running at any given time. So at the moment, Capture One is open, and see everything's set up for Capture One. I can rate my images with these buttons here, and then I can go through all my editing functions just by twisting the controllers here. So a bit more exposure, lift some shadows. Obviously I'm not really concentrating on the editing that I'm doing particularly at the moment, but this is just for you, showing you the controller scenario. And then I've got some different buttons on my Loupedeck that can take me to a different page, which changes the function of the knobs. So now I can change the saturation, and I can go back there and warm the picture up if I wanted, or cool it down. And if I press that next button, I've got that same controller to change the tint, whether I want the increase the tint or go more green, or if you press it in the middle in this particular software, it resets to the default setting. So all of these could be reset just by pressing the knob down. So yeah, once you get the muscle memory of where everything is, oh dear, you can make a horrible edit like that. But yeah, so I'm just trying to show you these things, and I've got a third page here that gives me the control over vignette and the dehaze control. So going back to the first page again, and I've got other buttons here so I can copy. So if I make some hideous adjustments to this, I don't know why it's looking so horrible at the moment. Anyway, I can copy those adjustments, go to another picture and paste those adjustments onto that picture, and go to my crop tool and crop. So it's very quick. So you've got before and after, and then I've got a button here that takes me to the whole library and back to the picture I'm editing. So then if I was to jump through to Lightroom, which I don't use, so you have to bear with me on that, I have all the controls directly on there as well. So I can change my exposure and my contrast and my highs and my shadows again. And then there's another page that takes me to the vibrance and the clarity and stuff like that. And there's a whole set of editing functions that can be got to with these buttons along the bottom. But basically with the Loupedeck, there's lots of predefined sets that you can load up, and they will work as somebody has externally programmed them as such. Or if we go back to Capture One, I've customized this to so I took the settings that came with the Capture One profile and I adapted them to the things I use and to make my settings immediately available. So like on this page 2, I can change my levels of the white point and the black point and the midpoint. And then I can even go into the color toning. And if I scroll down here, you can see on the left, where are we? Color balance. So I've got a function for changing the hue. So if you look at the shadows, so if I take those around to the blues, I can then add more blue into the shadows and the midtones. Yes, so you can see it's all very accessible. So that's the Loupedeck. The Streamdeck's obviously just button based, although you can program MIDI faders in it, but that's a whole nother story. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I've got a few buttons that will change the tool, and I can change the color that I've set up in my library, or give it a rating, or put a grid on and off. Can I put a grid on and off? Oh yeah, there we go. So these little things that I can do that just stop me thinking, what was the key command for that? So that's really cool. So then if I go to Luminar Neo, same sort of picture. Luminar Neo doesn't at the moment seem to, although I haven't contacted them, so I need to actually contact them and see whether that's something that's coming. There isn't a facility to control faders in Luminar Neo. So within this device, you can set one of the knobs to control mouse drag. So if I hover my mouse over exposure, I can drag this controller left and right in the same way that I would do if it was assigned to that controller. Because when you're making very small adjustments with your trackpad, which I'm doing now, sometimes it's sort of, I don't know, there's a stickiness, or even with a mouse, it's just such fine movements that you have to make for very small adjustments. Whereas with this, you sort of know what you're getting. You're just turning it around. There's no sort of pressure on your hands. You haven't got to hold your hands still. It just is what it is. And that's what I find really nice. And you can go and change any function with this same controller and use it in tandem, if you don't move too quickly, in tandem with your right hand moving to the area you want to change, and your left hand, or whatever way round you would wish to do it, doing the adjustments. So in that way, you can tailor these devices to work with any software. And I've got these various buttons. I've got the preview on and off. I've got copy adjustments, paste adjustments. You can access the crop tool. So now I sort of know that they're all there. I can quickly get at them without having to think, where is that, or scroll around in the menu. So yeah, another little thing. So if I chose this control and wanted to change some masking, brush in some masking, I've got this controller to change the brush size and the softness of the brush, which, you know, it's just all so you can be doing some masking and then change the thing without without changing where you're looking. You're just actually adjusting things where you want it to be. So I find it really, really intuitive to use all of these. So even if I went into Photoshop, you can see all of these change, and I'll go back to Capture One and I will edit with Photoshop, and that will then bring me into Photoshop, and we can see a few little bits and bobs. So yep, here we are. So we can zoom in and out on here quite nicely. I can, when I'm using the pen tool, I've got a function here that makes selection, and then I can do another pen area. I can't really see it there, and add that to a selection. So I've populated this with things that I find useful. So I've got fill and deselect on here. I've got the pen tool, hand tool, the brush, and things like that. And over here, got to say, I don't use this so much, but I've got make selection and add selection on there, and you get back what you put into the system. So there's an element of investment of time trying to set both of these things up as you want them. As you carry on using them, you have to go back from time to time and develop how you've got them set up. So it's definitely you have to put in the work to get something out. And then I just quickly at the end, I'll show you the knob controller, which is a bit like when we went back to Luminar and I was using this as a fader. You can see how quickly the whole, because I haven't programmed anything on here for Luminar. That's nothing, it doesn't change. It just sits on the last setting it had. But yeah, so this knob controller works very similar to this drag mouse drop. So whatever I put it over, not erase, but any fader that I want to move, this will move. And this is really nice. This is, I think they primarily developed this for audio work. So like audio plugins, if you have a sort of a device that looks like an old mixing desk that had loads of knobs and dials on, this it was designed specifically for that. But it because it just uses mouse protocol, you can use it for anything. So it works really, has a lot of very fine control. It's quite a high resolution thing, and you can just, you know, work away, and it's touch sensitive and everything, and it's really cool. And I found that having these things, sometimes one thinks, oh, I must use them, but you just use whatever you need at any given moment. So if you're on your keyboard and you're on your trackpad or mouse and you just dive into that, I don't sort of beat myself up if I don't use one of these controllers, but I like the fact that I've got many options that will help me when I need them, really. And sometimes when I boot the software and I haven't got one of these open, it slows me down because I'm thinking, oh, where's that button that I programmed? So, you know, for me, it's been really amazing. And, you know, I don't know how you could try any of these out, but for use with all sorts of software, I mean, if I go into Chrome, you can see over here and over here, this has changed to whatever I've set up in Chrome. So I could boot YouTube if I don't know whether I'm allowed to show you a YouTube screen without getting in trouble, but this now operates my overall volume of my laptop. And yeah, so they're just, it's quite just a cool thing that you can program But as I say, if you don't put in the initial setup work, you won't get a lot out of them, and they will seem clunky bits of kit that just sit around doing not very much. But if you're a bit of a hands-on sort of geeky bloke like me, then I would recommend having a look at them. And yeah, if you want me to go into more detail on any one of these and how I particularly use them, let me know in the comments, because yeah, I'm happy to discuss how I've got them set up and some of the options that are available whilst using them. So I hope you found that little insight into how I use hardware controllers in my photo editing useful. And if you want to see any more information on the Streamdeck or the Loupedeck Live or even the Nobcontrol, I've put links to the manufacturers' websites in the description below. And yeah, let me know in the comments if you want me to do a more detailed video on either of those, either or all of them, or any one of them. And if you want to subscribe and click the thumbs up icon, that will really help my channel, and I'd be really grateful. So hopefully I'll see you back here soon. Thanks a lot.